In our today's topic, we look at which ratio to use, and the learning objective is to decide which trigonometric ratio to use in a right angle triangle. Okay, and before we embark on this, student should be familiar with calculating missing sides and angles of right angled triangle using the trigonometric ratio, sine, cosine, and tangent. These are the previous lesson we did. Okay, so student must have known how to work it out. Okay, now we revise what we did last time, that if we have a right angle triangle, if I have a right angle triangle, example, so it is right angle triangle at this angle 90 here. Okay, so if I have this now, and I say that here is the angle, so since here is the angle, the side that is opposite the angle is what we call the opposite. The side that is opposite the right angle, that's the angle 90, is what we call the hypotenuse, or we call it the longest side, while the leftover side is what we call the adjacent. So even if here is the angle, that means here will be the opposite. See that? So the opposite and the hypotenuse is determined where the angle is. Understand? Determined by the position of the angles, while the hypotenuse is just the one opposite the right angle, and is also the one that has the longest side. Okay, now for me to solve this using the sine, cosine, and the tangent, I need to find something to memorize. My SOHCAHTOA, using SOHCAHTOA, this will enable me to memorize how to solve the trigonometry. We did this last class. Okay, x, which stand for what? Sine, and sine means what? O, opposite over h, hypotenuse. C stands for what? Cosine, and cosine, which means A is what? Adjacent, over H is what? Hypotenuse. And T stands for what? Tangent, and tan means O, opposite, over A, adjacent. So please record this. We always use this to solve the problem. Okay, let's look at some question there. This says, find the length marked S in each of these triangles. For the triangle A, look at this. Before I start this, I have to first of all bring out my SOHCAHTOA. SOHCAHTOA. Okay, now from here, we have that this is the angle, this opposite to the angle, so this is the opposite. That means that my opposite there is 10. This is the angle 90. Right angle is opposite the right angle, or I say is the longest side also, is x. That means that my hypotenuse is x. Now, which ratio am I going to apply here? Or which angle am I going to apply? Here I have here to be opposite hypotenuse. Opposite hypotenuse. Like I have opposite hypotenuse, that means I'm using sine. So we have this to be that sine theta simply means opposite over hypotenuse. Theta is 62. So we have sine 62 is equal to opposite is 10. hypotenuse is x. Okay, so if I cross multiply, we have this to be x is equal to 10 divided by sine 62. So x will be equal to what? Let's check. 10 divided by sine 62. 10 divided by sine 62. 11.3. So that gives us what? 11.3. So 11.3 is the hypotenuse. Okay. Now in the same way, let's quickly look at this also. Here, this point is our angle. Okay. This is opposite. The opposite remains 10. Opposite is 10. This is the hypotenuse. And the remaining side is the adjacent. So the adjacent is what? X. Now I'm looking at opposite adjacent. Opposite adjacent. No. Opposite. No. This is opposite adjacent. Which means it's what? Tan. So that means I have this to be tan theta is opposite over adjacent. Theta is 62. So we have this to be tan 62 is equal to opposite is 10, adjacent is x. So if I cross multiply, we have this to be x, cross multiply, x is equal to 10 over tan 62. So x gives us, let's check what 10 divided by tan 62 gives us. We have that to be 3.5. So this gives us what? Sorry, 5.3, not 3.5. We have that to be what? 5.3. Okay. So this gives us what? X is equal to 5.3. So 5.3 is our answer. Okay, one more example. Here, we are asked to find the angle marked Y in the triangle. The angle marked Y, this is A, this is B, the angle marked Y in the triangle. But before I start there, I have to first of all bring out my soccer tool. Okay, this is O. Now from the first one, this is the angle. That means here will be the opposite. This is the angle 90. That means here is the longest side and also opposite to this angle. Here will be my hypotenuse, while the leftover gives us the adjacent. Okay. Now hypotenuse and adjacent are known. We use the known to find the unknown. You know that hypotenuse is 80 and the adjacent is 50. Okay, so looking for Y, the angle, we check which of them gives us hypotenuse and adjacent. Adjacent hypotenuse. Adjacent hypotenuse, no? Adjacent hypotenuse, that's this. So we are talking about cosine. So that gives us that we have this to be cosine. Cos theta is what? Cos theta gives us adjacent. A first. Adjacent over hypotenuse. See that? So theta is Y. That means I'm having this to be that cos Y, because my theta is Y. Cos Y is equal to adjacent is 50 over hypotenuse is 80. Okay, so cos Y will give us 50 divided by 80 will give us what? 50 over 80 is what? 0.625. 0.625. Now, for me to find the angle that gives us this, I will find the cosine inverse of this. We have done that before. We look for the cos inverse of 0.625. So the cos inverse, that gives us what? Look for the cos inverse shift cos, depending on your calculator. So that gives us shift cos, gives us cos inverse of what? 0.625. We have that to be 51.3, or approximately 651 to the nearest degree. So this gives us what? 51 degree. Okay, now let's quickly solve the other one. If you're asked to find this as well, in this case we have this to be what? This is the angle, so this is the opposite to the angle. Opposite is 50. This is the angle 90, this is opposite, so hypotenuse is 80. So which of them gives us opposite hypotenuse? Opposite hypotenuse, that gives us sine. That means that sine theta is opposite over hypotenuse. Theta is y. So we have this to be sine y is opposite is 50, hypotenuse is 80, which we have calculated here already. So sine y is 0.625, 50 divided by 80. So for me to find the angle that have this, we find the inverse sine of this. So the y will gives us what? Y is equal to sine inverse of 0.625. Okay, so what is sine inverse of what is sine inverse? Check shift sine, give us sine inverse of 0.625. That gives us what? 38.6, which gives us 39. This is up to 5. 39 to the nearest degree. So this have this to be what? 39 degree. That's how we solve the question. So before you solve this, always remember SOHCAHTOA. Sine, opposite hypotenuse. Cosine, adjacent hypotenuse. Tan, opposite adjacent. Always record this. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.